In this video, I am going to teach you how to build a full authentication system that includes the login, the register, the logout, and the reset password features. So this is like a full authentication system that you can add into your Django project. So right now, I will just be showing you a demo of how everything works, first of all. So I'm going to start by signing up as a new user. So the name is going to be John or Jane. The first name is going to be Jane, and then the last name is going to be Doe. The username is going to be test user. The email is going to be the protonguy@yahoo.com, and then the password is just going to be whatever I specify. I'm just going to register with these details right now. So we're going to log in with the username and password of that user that we had just created. Now, I want you to note that there are also validation checks. So if, for example, I were to log in with the user details, I can type the username, which is test user, but then I can now type in a wrong password. So once I type in a wrong password and try to log in, you can see that we get an error saying invalid login credentials. So our backend or the code that we're going to be writing is capable of validating the user um, details. So now I'm just going to log in with the correct details, and then I'm going to fill the form and log in with the correct details. So once I log in with these correct details, you can see that we are being redirected to the home page. Now, I want you to note that the only way we can access this home page is if we are authenticated. So I'm going to show you what I mean. So in this home page right now, we just have a simple text saying hello world, and we have a logout. So I'm just going to log out. Now, once I log out, you see we are being redirected back to the login page. If I try accessing the home page, once I try to access the home page, because I am not logged in, I get redirected back to the login page. So in order to access that home page, I need to actually log in. So let's say, for example, we have forgotten the user's password. Now, because of the reset password feature that we are going to be building, we are going to be able to reset that user's password. I'm just going to click reset password. Now, for the reset password feature, what you have to do is you have to enter your email that is associated with that account. So let's say I enter a wrong email which does not exist in my database. If I click reset password, knows that it gives us an error saying no user with that email found. So that means that anytime you enter an email here, before it sends you a reset, before it sends you an email explaining how to reset your password, it first of all checks if that email actually exists in our database before sending the email to you. So I'll just actually now enter the correct email of that user. So once I click reset password, I should get an email telling me that, okay, so now it says reset sent. It says a password link has been sent to your email. Please note that it expires in 10 minutes. So what I will just do is I am going to go back and check my emails. So I'm just going to come and refresh. So what can you see? I can see that the link has been, the email has been sent to us, and it says reset your password using the link below. So I can just come and copy this link. I can head back to my other browser, open a new tab, and paste it. So once I paste it, it's now asking me to reset my password. I'm just going to enter the new password. Now let's just say for any reason, the passwords do not match. Once I hit reset, you can see it shows an error saying passwords do not match. So I'm just going to enter the correct passwords. Now once I hit reset password, we are going to be redirected to the login page. Now, once I try to log in with those details, I'm going to enter the username, which is test user, and then I'll enter the password. So once I hit submit, you will notice that we get redirected back to the home page. So that shows us that we can successfully reset passwords using reset links, which gets sent to our email. Now, I want you to also note that the reset links that get sent can only be used once. So let's say I log out and I try to access that reset link again. Once I click enter, you see that we get redirected to the reset password page, and it says invalid reset ID. That is because anytime a reset ID is used once, it gets deleted immediately because a reset ID can't be used twice, and reset IDs expire in 10 minutes. So this is what we're going to be building basically today. So if you want to get the code to this tutorial, there's going to be a link in the description, which you can use to get all the code from my GitHub repository. And I am also trying to build a community. Please, I want you to check the links in the description. So you can join my Discord server, you can join my Telegram group chat, and you could just follow me on LinkedIn and Telegram. So thank you. Let us begin. In this video, I am going to teach you how to build a full authentication system in Django. So I am going to be explaining how to build the login, the logout, the register, and the reset password features. Now, I am going to point out that I assume you have some basic knowledge of Python and Django. And I also wanted to inform you that if you want to get the code for this project, there's going to be a link in the description which will take you to a GitHub repository where you can download or view the code. So what you see right here is just a README file which I had created, and it just outlines the steps that we are going to be taking. So if you also want to reference this file later on, it's also going to be in the repository. So it just has a list of the steps that we are going to be following in order to build this project. Now, the first step is that we need to actually set up the Django project because obviously we need to set it up. Now, the first thing is we need to create and enter a desired directory for our project setup. Now, I want you to just create a folder, and inside this folder is where you are going to keep your Django project. So I had already created one called full authentication. Now, I created this earlier, so I want you to also do the same thing. Now, the next step is that we need to create a virtual environment using the pipenv shell command or any other means. So we're going to be creating that virtual environment inside our projects folder. So I am just going to open my command line or my command prompt. Now, once I open my command prompt, what I need to do is I need to enter the location of where my projects folder is. I'm going to cd into desktop, and then I'll cd into tutorial. I'll see the YouTube, and then I'll see the full authentication. Now I am currently inside my project folder. Now the next thing that we need to do is we need to create the virtual environment. Now, if you have your own special way of creating a virtual environment, by all means, I want you to create it using your way. But the way I like to create virtual environments is using the pipenv library. Now, if you want to follow my way, the first thing that you need to do is you need to actually first install this library. So I'm going to run the command pip install pipenv. So once I paste that, it's just going to install the pipenv command for you. But pipenv library, I mean. But because I already have it installed, you can see it's saying requirement already satisfied. Let me clear my screen. Now, the next step is that we now actually need to create this virtual environment. So the way we create virtual environments using the pipenv library is we just run the command pipenv space shell. So once we run that, it's going to create a new virtual environment inside your present working directory. And it's going to name the virtual environment the name of your current working directory. So just do that and you just wait for it to create the virtual environment. Now, as you can see, it says successfully created virtual environment. And you know that it is activated once you see the name of your present working directory in parentheses. So what is also good about this library is that the moment it creates this virtual environment, it automatically activates it for you. Now, I would just like to shed more light on how to activate and deactivate your virtual environments using this library before we proceed. Now, if I would like to exit or deactivate this virtual environment, all I have to do is just type exit. So once I type exit, you can see that we are no longer in the virtual environment. But if I would like to reactivate it, the first thing I need to do is cd into the location of where that virtual environment was created. But since I'm already inside the folder, full authentication, where the virtual environment was created, I'm just going to reactivate it again from here. And we reactivate it by just running the pipenv shell command. So it's just going to reactivate it. So once I run that, you can see it says launching subshell in virtual environment. Right. So I just wanted to clear that out of the way. Now, the next step is that we need to now install Django because obviously we are going to be working with Django. So run the command pip install Django. So now that we have Django installed, the next step is that we need to create a Django project. So we're going to call the project authentication project. So just head to your terminal, that is after installing Django, and run the command django-admin start project and then authentication project. So once I run this command and I type dir, you can see that we already have our project installed and created for us. Now the next step is that we need to create an application called core. So I'm just going to cd into my app folder or with the folder that was created for us. And I'll say cd authentication project. Now once I am inside authentication project, what I'm just going to do is I'm going to run python manage.py start app, and I'll call the app core because that is what we want to call our app. Now, once I type dir, I can see the content, I can see my projects folder, and I can see my app folder as long as the manage.py file. So now we have created our app and our project folder. So the next step is that we need to open our project in whatever code editor that you are using. So because I am using Visual Studio Code, I am just going to open my project right now in Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to open my folder where the project is present in, and then I will open it with Visual Studio Code. So once I open it with Visual Studio Code, I also want to close the old one, which had the README file. And I would like to open the README file in this new tab so that we can be following it step by step. So right now, I have opened my Visual Studio. I have opened my project inside my code editor, which is Visual Studio Code. And I can see my manage.py file, I can see the app folder, and I can see the project folder. So let me just zoom in here so you can see everything. Now, the next step in the README file is that we need to create a templates folder and register it in the project settings. So we're going to create a templates folder, and this is just going to house all our HTML files. So I'll create the folder and I'll call it templates. Now, the next step is that we need to register this templates file in the settings to let Django know that we have a templates folder so it can look into those folders for our HTML files. So I want you to scroll down to line 57 where you have dirs, and in quotes just type in templates. Now once you type that in, just save it and we'll head back to the README file. Now the next step is that we need to register the app in the project settings. So because we created an app called core, we need to head to our settings and tell Django that we created an app called core. I'm just going to type in core right here and put a comma. So make sure whatever you type in here matches the name of the application. In our case, we created it and we named it core. So after doing that, we need to create a separate URLs file for our app and register it in the project URLs. So I am going to come to my app folder, which is core, and I'll create a new file and I'll call it urls.py. So urls.py. And then I'm just going to write a few inside this file. So I'll first of all say from django.urls import path. Now, after importing the path, I'm going to say from dot import views. So I'm just trying to import path, which is an inbuilt package or which is inbuilt in Django. And then by saying from dot import views, it means I'm just trying to import the views file in this present directory, in this present folder. Then I'm going to create the URL patterns list, and I will equate this to an empty list for now. So I am getting this error because I haven't properly set my Python interpreter. So I'm just going to select the correct one, which is full authentication. So that's the correct one. So once I select it, this error should disappear, as you can see. So now the next step is that after creating this URLs file, we need to register the URLs file inside the Django URLs file. So because we have created a separate URL inside our app folder. Now we need to let Django know that we have created this separate URL file, and we can do that by including it inside the project URL file. So after saying from Django.urls import path, I'm just going to also import include. Now what I'm just going to do is I'm going to say path, and I'll just leave it empty. And after leaving it empty, I'm going to tell Django to include the URLs which are present in core.urls. So it's just going to go into the URLs file inside our core app application, and it's going to take note of all the URLs which we create there. Now the next step is that we need to set up static files in our settings.py. So head to your settings, and the first thing that we need to do is, before setting up static files, we need to import a library known as OS. So just type import OS because we need to make use of it. Now just scroll to where you have a static file, static URL right here, and we're going to be replacing it with something else. So because we want to set up our Django projects to ensure that static files get properly displayed, so static files like your HTML, your CSS files, your JavaScript files, or your images. So I'm just going to replace it with all of these. So we still have static URL defined, but we're defining static root and static files dirs. So if you are going to be having, for example, let's say CSS files, JavaScript, this is going to help us set them up properly. Now, I also want to note that as we progress in this video, I am going to be providing the HTML files that we can use in order to build this authentication system. But if you have your own front-end files, you can use your own, and there's no issue. But I'm going to be providing you with HTML files and the CSS file, so that we can properly follow the tutorial. Now, the next step after setting up the static files is that we need to now get the template files from GitHub. So there's going to be a link in the description of this video where you can actually go and get all these template files. But for me, I already have them stored somewhere inside this required files directory. So there won't be any need for me to actually download them. But for you, you can just visit the link. And if you want to make use of my files, you can download the files and make use of it. So it says download the following HTML templates file from GitHub. Now, after downloading all these files, what we need to do is that we need to move them to our templates folder, because the templates folder is where we're going to be storing all the HTML files needed for this project. So I will just copy all the HTML files. And once I copy them, I am going to go and paste them inside my templates folder. So I'll just paste them right there. Now what I can do is I can come back to Visual Studio Code, and I can see that all the files are present. Now the next step is that because I have a static file present, I need to create a folder for static files. So I'm going to call it static, static. Now inside this static file is where I am going to be storing the CSS. So I'm just going to go back to where I have my resources, and I am going to copy the style.css file which is needed. Now again, you can get all these files in the GitHub link which I'm going to provide. So I'll just go into my static directory or static folder and paste that CSS file. So now I can see my CSS file inside the static folder. So now that we have gotten all the template files from GitHub and we have added them to the project, the next step we need to take is that we need to make required imports. So I want you to head to your views.py file, and I want you to copy all of this. I want you to type out all of this or copy it. Head to your views.py file inside your core application. Now, once you've done that, just paste all of this inside. Now, I am going to be explaining to you why we need all these imports, but I just want you to type out all of this, or if you are also following my README file, you can just copy all of this and paste it in there. So we're going to be making use of each and every one of these imports, which we have made here. Now, the next step is that we need to create a super user because we want to be able to access the admin dashboard to actually view the users which have been created in the project. So by the end of this project, we are going to be able to create users and log in. And we need a way to log into the admin dashboard, see all the users which have actually been created. So head to your terminal and we are going to be creating a new super user. Run the command python manage.py create super user. So once you run that, it's going to say no such table auth user. So that is because we have created a new project and we haven't made the proper migrations. That is because right now no user class currently exists because it's a new project and we first have to migrate all the database tables before this can work. So just run the command python manage.py migrate. And once you run that, it's just going to make all of these migrations for us. And after it has made all these migrations, we can now create a super user. So I'm going to run python manage.py create super user. So once I do that, it's going to ask me for a username. I'll just type in admin and I'll press enter because I want to leave the email empty. And for password, I'll enter the password and enter the password again. And it says this password is too short, but I don't care. I'll just say yes. So right now I have created the super user. Now what we need to do is we now need to log into the admin dashboard with the credentials that we had just created. So I am going to run my Django server in order to log into the admin dashboard. So I'm going to do that by running the command python manage.py run server. So once I do that, it's just going to start the local development server for us. And I can head to my browser and I can just visit localhost. So once I visit localhost, I can see it says the install worked successfully. So I am going to proceed to log into my admin dashboard. I'll go to /admin and I will log in with the details which I had just created or which I had just entered. So once I log in, I can see that there is nothing here. And if I go to the users, sorry, if I go to the users tab, you can see that there is just one user, which is the super user that I had just created. So now we are able to see all the users which exist in our website or database. So the next step is that we need to now start creating the required views, which we are going to be making use of in order to actually work on this authentication project. So we need to first of all create the home view. So I will just copy this and head to my views.py file and I am going to paste it. So we're just creating the home view. So this is just what the user is going to see when they visit the home view. Now, after the home view, I am going to create two views for the register and the login pages or login views. So I'll come down also and paste it. So we basically just have simple views called home, register view, and login view. And they all return a certain, they return request and they return an HTML file using the render inbuilt function which Django gives us. So now we know that we can return these HTML files. And these HTML files, remember, are present in the templates directory, which we had created. And we had gotten these files earlier from the GitHub repository. So now that we have created these basic views, what we simply need to do next is that we need to map these views to URLs. So I'm just going to copy this. And since we had already created a urls.py file inside our application folder, I'm just going to paste this right here. So what we're simply doing is we're making use of path and we're trying to map each view to a URL. So because we want the index or because we want the home view to be the base there, to be the base URL. That is when a user visits our URL on the base domain like example.com. This is the view that they are going to be taken to. We're just going to leave the URL empty and then we're mapping it to the to the home view. That is why we imported views. So we can say views.home in order to map this URL to a view. So we did the same thing for register. We mapped this to the register view and gave it a name of register. And we did the exact same thing with the login view and we gave it a name of login. So I'm just going to save that. When I save that, I'll go back and make sure that my server is running. Now, the next step is that I am just going to head back to my browser and I will go to the base URL. So localhost, sorry, port 8000. So when I go to localhost port 8000, you can see it just says hello world and there is a logout button that does nothing. So if I head to that file, open my templates directory and head to index.html, you can see that this is just the HTML file that gets returned to us. It says hello world and there is a URL that just says logout, but it's currently linked to the logout.html file, and we're going to see how we can make the logout functionality work eventually. But this is what we get on the landing page right now. So the next step, according to the README file, is that we need to work on the register view, because the first feature that we're going to be building is that we need to build out the register functionality so that we can enable users to register on our web app or application. Now, I'm just going to head to the register view, and I want you to take note of this register.html file, and I'm just going to open it right now inside the code editor. Now, the next step is that it says we need to change the static file links in all files. So I will just copy this and I will explain what I mean. So all the files are currently linked to the styling file. All the HTML files currently have a link tag that links them to the CSS file, which just helps in the styling. And this is the CSS file, which is present in the style.css file. So what we need to do is, instead of having this, let me open my HTML file again. What we need to do is that instead of having this link, we know that this will not work. So what we need to do is we need to change it up. So to show you that it is not working, we can head to the register view right now. I'm just going to go to /register. And you can see that right now it's not able to find the static file. And if I open my terminal right now, you are going to see that there is a 404 error that says it can't find my CSS file. So what we need to do is we need to properly link the CSS file in the register.html file. So I'm just going to come here. I'm going to type in static because I'm trying to link to this static file. Now, because it is inside the static directory, I'm just going to say static and then style.css. I'm going to do that and close off the linking. Now, the last thing I need to do is inside the head tag, I'm just going to say load static. So once I save that, head back to my browser and refresh. Once I refresh, you should see the static file kick in immediately. So let's see why this is loading slowly. So now you can see that this is how the register page looks like. You can see the CSS has kicked in and it looks very nice. So we're going to be collecting the user's first name, last name, username, email, and password. So let's head back to our code editor and see what we need to do next. So the next step right now says that we need to head to the register.html file and give input fields a name attribute and add the CSRF token to change the login URL and change the login URL. So the first thing that we need to do is, obviously in Django, anytime we are filling HTML files and anytime we are going to fill an HTML file and send a post request to the backend, we need to have CSRF token present, so as a security feature. So we're just going to add that in right now. So I'll put my percent signs and say CSRF underscore token. So CSRF stands for cross-site request forgery. So it's just a security measure that we have to provide. in order to make our forms work in post request. Now, the next step is that we need to give the input fields name attribute. So these name attributes are going to serve as a unique identifier, and they are going to help us grab whatever the user enters in the form. And whatever the user enters in the form is going to be mapped to the name as a unique identifier. And using the name as a unique identifier, we can basically grab what the user has entered in each field. So we are going to see how it works. Now, for the input tag, I'm going to give it a name attribute of, for this first one, I'm going to give it a name attribute of first name. So I'll call this first underscore name, which is what we have here. I'll call it first underscore name. Now, for the second one, I'm also going to give it a name attribute of second underscore name. For username, I'll give it a name attribute of username. For the email, I'll give it a name attribute of email. For the password, I'll give it a name attribute of password. Now, those are all the fields that we need to give name attribute. Now, using this name attribute, again, we are going to be able to grab what the user has entered. So you are going to see how this is going to work. Now that we have done all that, I am just going to save the file and head back to the README. Now, the next step is that in the register view, we need to check for incoming form submission and grab the user data. Now, because this is a So if I head to the front end right now, because this user is going to be filling the form and hitting register, all this data is going to be sent as a post request. So if I head to the form, you can see that the method is post. So it basically means that we are going to be sending that data back to our backend or back to our server. And because all that data is going to be coming to the register view, we need a way of grabbing what the user has entered. So in the register view, we need to check for incoming form submission and grab the user data. So I'm just going to come to the view right now, and I'm going to write an if statement. I'm going to say if request dot method is equals to post. So what we're simply checking for here is that if the incoming request is a post request, that is, if the user has filled the form and has clicked submit, it means that the form is going to send a post request along with all the data that the user has entered. So that is why we're writing if request on method is equals to post, in order to check for if the incoming request is a post request. Now, after checking for the incoming request, what we now need to do next is that we need to grab what the user has entered in each input field. Now, remember that we had given each input field a name attribute. So I am going to show you how to grab all the user data using their name attributes. So I'm going to create a new variable and I'll call it first name because the first name is the first data that the user enters. And I'm just going to say first name is equals to request.post.get, and in here I need to pass in the name attribute. So because I gave the first name input field a name attribute of first underscore name, it means I can just pass that in first underscore name. So once I pass in first underscore name, Python immediately knows that we are trying to grab whatever data the user has entered in this input field, because this input field has a name attribute of first underscore name. So I'm going to do the same for second name. So I will just copy this and paste it. So this is going to be called second underscore name. Now I will do the same for username, email, and password. I'm going to come and paste this 3 times, username, email, password. So I'll change this from first name to username. And this is also going to be called email. And then the last one is going to be called password. So what we have done right here, right now, is that we have successfully gotten all the user data from this post request or from this form submission. Now, the next step is that we need to actually validate the data provided, because anybody can enter any sort of data into our backend. And we need to make sure that whatever data has been entered is valid. So we're just going to create a flag for an error. And I'm going to explain why we are doing this, but I want you to just follow with me. So this is going to be called user data has error. And I'll just copy this, head to my views.py file. And after collecting all the user details, I will create this variable user data has error as a flag. So at first, it's going to be set to false. But when we perform validation on all the input fields or all the input data, if any of them has a specific issue or an error, we're going to set this flag to true. And at the end, we're going to make use of this flag to determine what we do if there's an error or if there isn't an error. Now we need to validate the email and username next. We need to make sure that the email and username are not being used by another user. For example, if you go to sign up on like Facebook or another website, for example, when you try signing up, if a user with that specific email or username already exists, it's going to show you an error saying the username already exists in database and you have to pick another one to use. So we're going to do something exactly like that. So the first thing is that we need to check if the username is already being used. So because we had already imported the user class right here from django.contrib.author-models import user, we're going to be making use of it right now. So I'm just going to copy this line and it is an if statement. So I'm just going to write an if statement right here. And I'm going to say if user.objects.filter username is equals to username.exist. So what I'm just trying to say is if a user with the username that the current user has entered already exists, that is, when a user fills this form and they want to register, that data is going to be sent to our views. So we're just trying to tell Python and Django to go through the database and see if that username, if a user with that username already exists. Now, if a user with that username already exists, we want to set the user data has error flag to true. Now, after setting it to true, we want to now generate a new error message, which is what we have here. Now that is why again we imported the messages library from django.contrib import messages because we need a way to be able to flash error messages or success messages to the user. So I'm just going to create a new error message. I'm going to say messages.error, and in here I'll first of all pass in request, and after passing in request, request, and after passing in a request, I need to pass in the message which we are actually going to display to the user. So the message is just going to be username already exists. So I'm just going to paste that thing. So the error that is going to be displayed is username already exists, which is going to suggest to the user that they need to pick a new username. So I am going to do the exact same thing for the email because we want to make sure that only one user can have the one email and no two users can have the same email as well as username. So I am going to copy this line and I'll do the exact same thing but for the email. So I'll write an if statement here. I'll say if user.objects.filter email is equals to email. So I'm trying to say, I want you to search through the database and check for any email that matches the email that the user entered. So we're just going to say if user.objects.filter email equals email dot exists. That is, if there is a user with this email that is in the database, then we just want to set the user data has error to true. Now, after setting it to true, we want to also generate a new error saying email already in use. So this is going to help us validate whether the email and the username that the user has entered exists in the database or not. Now, the next thing is that we need to validate the password length. So we want a case where users can only register with passwords that are more than 5 characters of length, because we don't want any user to register with a password that has 3 characters, and that is totally not safe. So we're going to write another if condition right here, which is going to check for the length of the username. And it's going to display an error if, sorry, the length of the password. And it's going to display an error if the length of the password is less than 5. So I'm going to write an if, and I'll say if length of password is less than 5 characters, Then if it is less than 5 characters, I also want to set the user data has error to true if it hasn't been set to true yet from these conditions. Now, after setting this to true, I'm just going to generate a new error. I'm going to say messages.error, and in here, I'm going to pass in request. Now, after passing in request, the error message that I want to display to the user is password must be at least 5 characters. So I'll just copy that and paste it here. So if the user enters any password which is less than 5 characters, it's going to set this flag as true, and then it's going to generate a new error telling the user that the password cannot be less than 5 characters. Now, the next step is that we need to create a user if there are no errors, and it redirects to the login page. Else, if there are errors, we want to redirect the user back to the login page and display the errors. So what that simply means is that if all of these conditions have been checked, once all of these conditions have been checked, if there is an error, this flag is going to tell us if there is an error because it has been set to true from each of the if statements. Now, the next step that we need to take is that we need to check if the user data has any error. So I'm going to say if user data has error, and if it is true, that is, if this value is true, this if statement is going to run. So what exactly do we want to do if the user data has error? We just want to redirect the person back to the login page. So if we head back to the register page, so if we head back to the urls.py file, you'll notice that the register URL has a name of register. So what we're just going to do is we are going to make use of the redirect inbuilt method that Django gives us. We're going to make use of it to redirect a user back to the register page if the data that the user entered has errors. I'm just going to simply say return return redirect, and in here I'm just going to pass in the name of the view that we want to redirect to, and that is going to be called register. register. Now I am passing in register here because the name of the URL is register. So after redirecting back to the register, the user is going to see all the errors. Now we are going to be talking about how to write code, which is going to, or we are going to be writing code, which is going to be rendering all these errors out in front end. But I want you to just stick with me as we're going to get to that step. Now, if the user data has no error, that is, if the user data error variable is false, we're going to write an else block. So we're just going to create a new user once we've determined that there are no errors. So I'm just going to create a new variable and I'm going to call it new underscore user. Now equate this to user dot objects dot create underscore user. Now what do we need to pass into this create underscore user method? We just need to pass in the details which the user had entered. So the user had entered the first name, second name. So actually, let's rename this to last name because I think that is better. So I'm going to rename that to last name, head back to my register.py and change this to last name, register.html, So once I've changed all of that to last name, we now need to start saving all of these values to the new user. So I'm going to say first name is equals to first name. So I'm trying to say the first name of this new user is equals to the first name that the user had entered in the post request that came in. So the first name that the user entered in the form, which got sent as a post request. Now we're also going to be doing this for last name. I'm going to say last name is equals to last name. Then I'm going to also do the same for email, username, and password. So I'll say email is equals to email, right? Email is equals to email. Then username is equals to username. And then finally, password is equals to password. So this is just going to help us grab all of these user inputs. And then after it has grabbed all of those user inputs, and it has performed the validation that we need, what we simply are now going to do is, if there are no errors, that is, if then we checked if user data has error, that is, if this value is true, then it means there is an error. So we redirect the person back to the register page. But if that isn't true, we're just going to create a new user. So after creating that new user, what we now simply need to do is we need to create a new message and redirect the person back to the login page. So I'm just going to come down and paste those right here. So what we're simply doing here is that if the user is created successfully, we're just going to first of all create a success message by saying messages.success, and we pass in request. And after passing a request, the message that we're going to pass in is account created, login now. So the user is going to see, let me just change this to double quotes. So the user is going to see this message getting flashed to them, account created, login now. So after we've created this message, we just want to redirect to the login page. Now we're saying return redirect to login because the name of the login URL is called login. So the user is now going to get redirected to this login view immediately after their account is created. So let's just save that file and head back to the README. Now, the next step is that we need to display incoming messages in the register.html, login.html, forgot.html, and reset.html pages. This is because we are going to be making use of the messages library to be displaying messages a lot in these files, which were listed right here. So first of all, we're going to be doing this for the register page. So I'll just copy all of this and I will explain what it means. So head to the register.html page, and at the top, just above, let's see, at the top, just above the form, which is what we have here, we are going to paste all of this. I'm just going to paste it right here and indent it properly. So what we're first of all doing is we're saying if messages, that is, if any message is coming in, that is, if any message has been created and the message is coming in, what we're just going to do is we're going to look through all the messages which might have been created. So for example, in this case, if the username already exists and if the email already exists, it means that two error messages would have been created. So it's going to have two messages that needs to be displayed. What we're doing is we're trying to look through all the messages by saying for message in messages. Now, the next thing that we're doing is we are checking if the message is an error message. So we're saying if messages dot, sorry, this is supposed to be if message dot tags. So we're saying for message in messages, if message dot tags is equals to error. That is, if the message is an error message, then we just want to simply display the error out as a message. So we're saying if messages for message in messages. So we're trying to look through all the messages which have been created. Then we're checking if the current message is an error message by saying messages.tags. Now that is coming from when we create a new message and we say messages.error. So the tags now get set as an error anytime we say messages.error. So we're just checking if the message is an error message, then we want to display it in this H4 tag, which has a color of fire brick. So it's going to get displayed as a red text. So whatever message that is getting displayed is going to be displayed as a red text. Then we have an else block. So if the message isn't an error message, what we simply want to do is that we just want to display the message, but in this case, the color is going to be Dodger blue. Now, I'm just going to copy this, right? And then I am going to paste it in the other files which were talked about. So the register, the login, I'm going to go to the login page, and just above the form, I'm going to paste that because we're going to be needing it later. And we also need to do that in the forgot password. I'll go to the forgot underscore password.html, and then I'm going to paste that here. And then after doing that, the last file is the reset password.html. I'll just come here and also paste it here. So now we have all these files having all of this, having this code right here, which is going to help us check for incoming messages. So now that we have done this in the register file, just save it, and we're going to head back to the README. So it says test the code to see if users can register now. So we have been writing all of this code since. The next thing that we need to do is we now need to actually test to see if it works. So I'm going to head to my register page and I'm going to refresh. So once I refresh, I'm just going to be filling these details. So for the first name, I'm just going to enter John. For the last name, I'll enter Doe. Now for the username, I'll just enter John Doe 123. And for the email, I'll enter johndoe@gmail.com. And for the password, I'll just enter a random password. Now, once I hit register, you can see that we have been redirected to the login page. Now, this is because we had filled all the details correctly when we had written all of this code. I'm sorry, when we had submitted the form, we had filled all the details correctly without any errors. And if I go back to uh, my admin dashboard, once I refresh, you can see that we have a new user which has been created here called John Doe 123. So we have the username set, the email set, the first name, the last name, and the staff status. So we know that our sign up feature right now is working perfectly. Now let's now test to enter wrong details. So let's say, for example, we are still going to enter John Doe, the same username, the same email, and let's just make sure our password is like less than 5 characters. So once I hit register, you can see all the errors that are being displayed to us. It says username already exists, the email already exists, and password must be at least 5 characters. So you can see that using the same details that we had created earlier, we got this error saying the username exists, email exists, and our password must be at least 5 characters. So right now we are sure that our register view works and all the code that we have written here works perfectly. Now the next step is that we need to start working on the login view. So we need to enable users who have created an account. We need to enable them to actually log into our platform. So that is what we're going to look at next. So right now, we need to continue working and write out the login view. So what I'm just going to do first of all is that I am going to go to the login endpoint or the login page, which serves our login.html file. Now you can see that right now it has this unstyled HTML page. That is because if we head to the login.html file, our static file isn't actually linked properly. So what we are going to do now is we are just going to link all the static files properly inside all our HTML files. So I will come to my admin.html file and I will copy this. And I'll head to the login.html file and replace it with the correct linking. And I'll do it for all the files which we have downloaded. I'll do it for the forgot password page. I'll do it for the password reset page. Basically, all the HTML files which are being linked to this CSS page. So the last one is going to be the reset password page. Now I'm just going to close that. Now when I head back to the front end and refresh, you should see the CSS has already kicked in. So it says invalid block tag on line 6 static. Did you forget to load this tag? That is because we didn't add load static, or I didn't add load static at the beginning or at the top. I'm going to come here and type load static. We're just loading, we're trying to say load static so that our static files can be displayed properly using this static specifier here. So I'll do the same for all the other files. I'll paste it there. In the login.html, I'll paste it here too. I'll do the same in the password reset page. In the register already has that. And then I'll do it finally in the reset password.html page. Now, once I head back and refresh, I can see that my CSS has already kicked in. Now, if I head back to my register page, just to show you something, If I head back to the register page, you note that there is a link right here that says already have an account, login. But once I click it, you can see it's linked to a login.html page. So what we need to do is head to the register page and link to the login URL. So I'm just going to clear out this login.html which is there, and I'm going to link properly to the login page. So I'm going to say URL of login. So what we're just simply trying to do here is we're trying to access the login URL by using the name login, because that is the name of the URL which is connected to the login view. So once I do that and refresh my register view, if I click the link right now, you can see that we are being redirected to the login page. So I'm just going to close the register view and the register page and other HTML pages that we don't need for now. So I will come to the login.html page and also do the same. I will remove this register.html and replace it with the proper link to the register page. So I'll pass in register here, register. So once I refresh, I should be able to move between the sign up and login pages right now. Okay. So now that we have done that, we need to move on to working on the login pages. So let me head back to my README file, and we're going to continue following the steps. So the next step is that we need to head to the login.html file and give the input fields a name attribute and add tsrf token. So the exact same steps that we took for the register.html page is what we need to take for the login.html page also. So I'm just going to come down here and add tsrf token. I'll say csrf underscore token. Now, after doing that, we need to give the input fields a name attribute. Because this is the username input field, and users are going to log in using their username and passwords. I'm just going to give this a name attribute of username, and I'll give the password input field a name attribute of password. After doing this, just save it and let's head back to the file. Then the next step is that in the login view, we need to check for incoming form submission and grab the user data. So exactly like what we did in the register view, we're going to be doing the exact same thing in our login view. So just head to your login view and we need to write an if statement, which is going to check for an incoming post request. Because anytime the user fills the login form, the data gets sent as a post request because we're trying to send or post data to the backend. So I'm going to say if request dot method is equals to post. Then after saying if request dot method is equals to post, we now need to simply get what the user has entered using the name attributes. So we need to get for username and for password. I'm just going to head to my views and I'm going to say username is equals to request dot post dot get, and in here I'm going to pass in username, and I'll do the same for password. I'm just going to rename this to password. So right now at this point we have gotten the user's username and password. Now the next step is that we need to authenticate the user details. So this is where we now actually need to make use of something that we had imported at the top. If we look at line 3 here, you can see that from django.contrib.auth, we had imported authenticate, login, and logout. So in this view, we're going to be making, in our login view, we're going to be making use of authenticate and login, which we had imported. Now, there is also something I would like to call your attention to. If in your case, you created this view and you called it login, I want you to note that calling this your view login is going to give an error because we had imported this function or this method called login from django.contrib. So it's going to clash and give errors. So make sure that your login view isn't just called login. If not, it's going to clash with this one that we have imported at the top and to give an error. So now that we know that we're going to make use of those inputs, what we need to do next is that we need to authenticate the user details. So we're going to be using authenticate, which we imported at the top. So according to the README file, we just need to do that right now. I'm going to head over to the post request. And in here, I'm going to create a new variable. And I'll say user is equals to authenticate. Now, what we need to pass into this authenticate is that we need to pass in three items. The first is request. And after passing in request, we need to pass in the username and the password. So we're going to say username is equals to username and password is equals to password. So what Django is going to do using authenticate is that it's going to take in this username, which we had gotten from the user, and it's also going to take in the password which the user had entered. And it's going to pass those details to this authenticate. Now, authenticate is going to go through the database and check for any user that has this username. And after it finds that user, it's going to check and see if the password that has been entered from the post request is going to check if that password matches the real password of the user that has this current username. So it just searches the database, gets a user with the username that was gotten from the post request. Then it also checks if that user, which it has gotten, has a password which matches what we have gotten from the post request. So we just want to authenticate and check if the credentials are actually okay. Now, what now happens is that if the credentials are actually okay, that is, if we're able to authenticate using this username and password, meaning that a user exists with this username and password, what Django is going to do is it's going to return that user back to us and it's going to be equated to this variable. But if for any reason these details aren't correct, it is going to return none back to us. That is, this authenticate class or method, this authenticate method, I mean, or function, is going to return back to us none, meaning that no user with these details that you have provided here exists. So we're going to see how we can do that. So now you can see that we have an if statement here, which checks if the user is not known. That is, if a user with these credentials exists, we just want to log that user in. So let's write the if statement now. I'm going to say if user is not known, that is, if this user exists in database, then we're just going to log the user into our project using the login method which we had imported at the top right here. So we're just going to log in the user. So I'm just going to come here and say login, and I'm going to pass in request, comma, user. So we're trying to log in this current user, this user that we have gotten from the authenticate function. So after passing in this login, what we now simply need to do is we need to redirect this person back to our home page, because what we're trying to build in this project is that when a user logs in, they get redirected to our home page, which has a name of home. So what we're just simply going to do is we're just going to return redirect to the home page. So after logging in the user, we're going to return redirect, and we redirect to the home page. So I'm just going to pass in home just like that. Now we need to take care of the case where the user is actually known. That is, if no user with these credentials were found in a database. So what we simply need to do in that case is that we're going to generate a new error and redirect the user back to the login page. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to write an else here. I'm going to say else, that is, if no user actually exists with those credentials. I'm going to create a new message. I'll say messages.error, and I'll pass in request. And after passing in request, I'm going to pass in the actual message of the error, saying invalid login credentials. Now, after creating this message, we want to redirect the user back to the login page so that they can see that error getting displayed in the login page. I'm going to say return redirect, and I'm just going to redirect back to the login page. So once we head back to our README file, what we now simply need to do next is that we need to restrict access to the homepage to only authenticated users. So what we want to do is that right now, if I go to the homepage, if I go to the homepage right now, I can see Hello World getting returned back to us. And I can see the URL. Now, I want a case where only a logged in user can see my homepage. So we need to restrict the homepage to only logged in users. And we can do that using this decorator, which we had imported earlier. So from django.contrib.auth.decorators, import login required. So this just helps us enforce that only a logged in user can view our homepage. So in order to use it, we're just going to call the decorator at the top of the home view and say at login required. So this is going to tell Django that in order to access this view, the user has to be logged in or authenticated first. Now, after restricting the user, there's something else that we need to pass in or that we need to set. We need to set the login URL in the settings.py file, because if a user which isn't logged in tries to, if a user that is not logged in tries to access our home page, we want to redirect the person back to the login page directly, because we don't want the user to access our homepage. Now we need to set where the user gets redirected to. So that's what the login URL is. So what it just basically specifies is that, okay, if this user is not logged in and our view has login required specified, so what it just basically means is that we want to redirect the person back, or we want to redirect the person to the login page. So that is what login required mainly does. So what we need to specify right now is the login URL in the settings.py file. And the login URL basically tells Django where to redirect a user to if a specific view requires them to be logged in and they are not logged in. So we need to specify login URL in our settings.py file. So I want you to head to your settings.py file and scroll to the bottom. Now we're going to create a new variable and call it login URL, and we are going to equate it to login. So what this basically means right here is that we are trying to tell Django to redirect an unauthenticated user to a URL that has a name of login. So when an unauthenticated user, that is a user that is not logged in, when that user visits our homepage and Django sees that the user needs to be logged in, that user is then going to be redirected back to a URL that has the name of login. So Django is going to come to the settings, check for the login URL and see that the name is login. Then it goes to the URLs.py file and it checks for a path or a URL that has the name of login. Then when it finds that URL, it's now going to take the person to the view that is associated with that URL. And then that is how the user gets redirected to our login view if they need to log in first before accessing a specific page. So now that we have specified the login URL, all we simply have to do is test the code to see if the users can log in. So what I will do right now is I will create a new, I will open my Edge browser and I will create a new account, or a new account first. But I need to make sure my server is running. So I'm going to run python manage.py run server. So that is just going to start my local development server for me. So when that runs, I am now going to go to the sign up page. So if you noticed, when I tried visiting the home page, first of all, so let me just try visiting the home page, which is base URL. When I tried visiting it, you can see that we are being redirected back to the login page. Now that is because we had specified that this home page requires the user to be logged in. When we specified login required, it means that this view requires that the user needs to be logged in, and then they were now redirected to the login page. So I'm just going to first of all create a new account. So the account name, this is going to be called Jane. The first name is going to be called Jane. Last name is going to be called Doe. And the username is going to be Jane123. The email is jane@gmail.com. And the password is going to be some random password. So once I click register right now, we are going to be redirected to the login page. As you can see, we have been redirected to the login page and there is a success message that says account created, login now. That success message is coming from our login view. At this point where we had created a new user, we created a new success message saying account created, login now, which is what you see here. And we are told Django to redirect to the login page. So now that we're on the login page, we're just going to log in with those details. I'm going to say Jane123 and then I will enter the password. So once I do that and click login, you are going to notice that we should be taken to the home page. So we have been taken to the home page because the credentials that we entered were correct. And we can see the login page because we are authenticated. Normally, like you saw, if we are not authenticated, we will not be able to see the login page. So now when we move on in our README file, you can see that so far we have been able to work on registering a new user. We have been able to work on logging in as a new, we have been able to work on logging in as like a user into our platform. Now, what we need to do is we now need to work on the logout view. So what if you are logged in and you actually just want to log out of your account? Now, that is why we had this logout link in the index.html file. So if I open it right now, my index.html file, you can see that we have a logout URL that just points to logout.html, but we are going to be changing that soon. So in the README file, it says that we need to create a logout view. So I will just come to my views.py file. So let me close my login and open my views.py file. So I will scroll down and create a new view and I'll call it logout view. Now this is going to take in request. Now after taking in request, all we simply need to do is just log out the user. Now we log out the user by using the logout method, which we had imported at the top. And it is very simple to log out the user. All we have to do is just call the logout method and we say logout request. And after logging out the user, what do we want to do? We now want to redirect the user back to our login page because after the user has logged in or has logged out, we need to take the user to a different page. We're just going to redirect the user to the login page so they can log in again. We're going to return redirect to the login page. Now, after redirecting to the login page or after writing this view, we now need to map this view to a URL. So I am going to head to my urls.py file and I'll add a new view. And in here, it's just going to be logout. And I'm going to map it to the logout view by saying views.logout view. And then I'm going to give this URL a name of logout. So this is name equals logout. I'm going to save that. Then after saving it, the next step is that we need to head to the login.html file and set the correct URL for the logout. So I'm going to clear out this logout.html and I'm going to pass in the proper URL. So I'm going to say URL of logout. So what we're simply just doing here is that we're trying to write in a link, which is going to, we're trying to type the link for this logout view. So it's going to be /logout /. So we're just basically trying to link to this logout URL. So that from that URL, the user can be taken to the logout view and then the user can be logged out successfully out of our platform. Now, if we head back to the code, what we just simply have to do is test to see if it works. So I am going to head back to this my Edge browser and refresh. So when I refresh, let me just refresh again. I am going to click the logout URL. So once I click the logout URL, you can see that we are being redirected back to the login page. And if I try to access the home page, you can see now that we are being redirected back to the login page. So it shows that we successfully logged out and our logout functionality in our views.py file is working perfectly. So basically, so far we have been able to talk about the register, the sign in, and the logout features. So moving on, we are going to start working on the forgot password section because we said that we're going to write the features that is going to help the user reset their password in a situation where they forgot it, for example. So what we're simply going to do right now is that it says that for step 12, we need to create the forget password model and views. So let's just first of all create the following views because we are going to need these views and I will explain why we are creating them. So I want you to just copy and paste those views. So we have the forgot password view, the password reset sent view, and the reset password view. And they are all returning these HTML files which are present in the templates directory or the templates folder. Now remember that this templates folder is what we had gotten these files earlier from the GitHub repository and stored them in this templates folder. Now, what we just simply need to do next is that we're going to head to the README file. And what we need to do next is that we need to map all of these views to specific URLs. So if we look at this forgot password view, it's basically just returning the forgot password.html page. Now this password reset sends view and this reset password view, they are special because they both collect, or sorry, they both accept a parameter called reset ID. Now we're going to be making use of this reset ID. But in order to make use of this reset ID, we need to pass it in through the URL. So through the URL, we're going to pass that reset ID and then we're going to grab it in the view just like this. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to copy these URLs from what I have here. So we're just trying to map this view basically to their own URLs. So after copying it, I'm going to paste those URLs in here. So the first URL that we have created is just for the forgot password view, which is what we have here, the forgot password view. So we're just mapping the URL forgot dash password forward slash this view. Now the next URL is password reset sent. And we're trying to map that URL to this view, password reset sent. Now, if you notice in the URL, it is password reset sent forward slash str reset ID. So what we're going to be doing is that anytime we pass this link or anytime we call this link, we're going to pass the reset ID into the URL so that we can get that reset ID from the view and make use of it. So let me just explain how this reset ID works. Now, when the user tries to reset their password, a code is going to be generated for them, which is going to be used to reset their password. Now, that code is going to be passed into the link of the reset password, is going to be passed into the link of the reset password view. So what we're now going to do is that that code only lasts for 10 minutes. So using that code, we're going to pass it into the URL. So when we get it in the view, we are now going to check if the time has reached 10 minutes. That is, if the duration of time where which the code was sent and the current time is greater than 10 minutes, then it means that the code has expired. So that is why we need to pass in the reset ID. So, but don't worry, you are going to see how this is going to work eventually. So after creating these URLs and mapping them to the view, okay, I didn't talk about this last one. So the last one is just the reset password view and is the reset password URL, which we are mapping to the reset password view. Now, these two views again accept the reset ID, which we are going to be making use of. So let's proceed. Now, the next step is that we need to create a model for the password reset. Now, remember that I said that anytime a user clicks like forgot password and they inputs their details, a new code is going to be created for them, or a reset ID rather is going to be created for them. Now, that reset ID has a time frame of 10 minutes. So if the time that the user is trying to reset their password using that reset ID is greater than 10 minutes, it's going to give an error. So we need a way of actually creating these reset IDs, storing them in a database so that when a user tries to reset their password using that reset ID, we can now determine we can determine whether the ID is still valid or not. So we are going to see how that will work. But I just want you to first of all create this model in your models.py file. So I want you to head to your models.py file inside your app folder and then just paste all of this or type it. So what we are simply doing is we are importing the Django user class and then we are importing UUID because we want to generate a unique ID each time the user tries to reset their password. Now we have a class or a model called password reset. Now this model has three fields. The user, that is the user who this reset ID belongs to. Then the second field is the actual reset ID. Now this is a UUID field, and by default, a new UUID.UUID4 ID gets generated by default. So anytime a new password reset object is created, by default, this value is going to be set to a UUID4, which is just a unique ID, which is going to get generated and stored by default. Then we're saying unique equals true and editable equals false because we want each ID to be unique because we don't want two users to have the same reset ID. So that is why we're saying unique is true. And then we're saying editable is equals to false because this value should not and cannot be editable. Now, we also have a third field called created when. Now, this just helps us create a timestamp of when the ID was created so that we can properly determine when it expires, which is in 10 minutes because each reset ID should only last for 10 minutes. Then we have a string method here that just basically helps us return the password reset is for whoever the user is, and it shows when the password reset ID was created. So after creating this model table, what we have to do is now make migrations and migrate. So I will just open my terminal right now in VS Code, and I am going to run Python manage.py, make migrations. We're trying to make migrations because we just created new database tables. I'm going to say Python manage.py, make migrations. Now that is just going to create this, it's just going to say create model password resets. Now what we now have to do is we need to migrate these changes so that the tables can be saved and created in the database. I'm going to say Python manage.py, migrate. Now, after saying Python manage.py migrate, it's just going to create those tables in our database. So the next step is that we need to now register this model in the admin.py file so that when we come to our admin dashboard, we can actually see that we can actually see the table or the entries in the database. So I will head to my admin.py file, which is here. And then inside this file, I am going to import that model. So I'm going to say from .models, that is, I am trying to reference the model file in this current working directory because the admin file and the models file are in the same folder or in the same directory. I can just say from .models, and I'm going to import password reset. So after importing that model, I am just going to register it in the admin, and then I'll say admin.site, oops, sorry, admin.site.register, and in here I'm just going to pass in password reset. Now after passing that in, I am just going to save it, make sure my server is running, and then head back to my dashboard and refresh. So once I refresh, I can now see the new table being displayed, the password reset, and it is under the core app. So right now, I can see that the tables have been created. So the next step that we need to take is that we need to now work on the forgot password view. That is the view that we had just created, which is the forgot password view. We need to work on it. So what I'm going to do is I am going to copy that URL which we created, forgot-password, and I'll head to my other browser and I'll visit that URL. So when I go to forgot password, you can see this is how it looks like. It's just basically going to ask the user to enter their email, which is associated with the account. So when the user enters the email, what we are going to do is we're going to send them an email that contains details that will help them reset their password. But before we send an email to whatever email does they enter, we are going to need to verify that a user with that email actually exists in our database, because we don't want to send a password reset email to a random email that doesn't exist in our database. So we're going to check if that email exists first. And if it exists, we're going to now send an email to the user telling them that, okay, this is how you reset your password. So we're going to do that right now. So just head to the README file. Then the step says head to your forgotpassword.html file. Then add a name attribute to the input field. So what I will just do is I'll first of all close out these files. Then I'll open my forgotpassword.html. Then the step says that we need to add a name attribute to the input field because we want to be able to grab the email that the user has entered. So first of all, I'm going to add CSRF token to this form. I'll say CSRF underscore token. And after doing that, I'm just going to add a name attribute here. I'm going to call this email. Now, after doing that, I will just save the file and come back here. Then it says add CSRF token and change the URL. So if I go back to the browser, you can see that there are two URLs that are for sign up and login. So what I'm just going to do is I will scroll down and make sure that these URLs are linked properly. So in here, I will link properly to the sign up page. So it's going to be a URL that links to the register page. And for the login, this one is going to link properly to the login page. So I'm going to say URL of login. So that way, when we refresh, the user can access these pages by using these links. So I'm just going to go back to the reset password page. The next step is that we need to now check for an incoming form submission in the forgot password view. That is, when the user has filled their email in and submitted the form, we need to grab that email. So it's what we have been doing before. I'll just write an if statement here that checks for a post request. I'll say if request.method is equals to post. And what do we want to do? We want to grab the email and say email is equals to request.post.get. And in here, I'm just going to pass in email. So after passing in email, we're just trying to grab the email that the user has entered right here. Now, the next step is that we need to now set up email settings so that we can send the email actually. Because you know that I explained that anytime a user enters their email and the details are correct, we are going to send them an email message to their email account. And that message is going to basically contain an instruction on how to reset their email. So right now, we need to set up our Django project to be able to send emails to our users to enable them reset their password. So what we need to do is we need to copy all of these settings and then we need to specify them. We need to copy all of this code and specify them in our settings.py file. So just go to your settings.py file and I will explain what all of these mean. When you do that, just paste them there. So I am going to be sending emails with my Gmail account. So you can decide to do this using a different method. But for this method, I will be sending emails using my Gmail account. So first of all, we need to specify the email host to be smtp.gmail.com because I'm trying to send using a Gmail account. And the email port is going to be 465. Then email use SSL is set to true. Then email host user. What this basically means is what account do you want to use to send this email? That is, what is going to be the sender account that is going to be sending these emails to the recipients, which are our users. Now, I am going to make use of my own email. So I'll type it right now. Now, the next thing is email host password. So if you are going to be using your Gmail account to send these emails, just typing in the password to your Gmail account won't work anymore because um, the security features were updated. So what you need to do is that you need to generate a Google app password. Now this app password is what we can now add to our code, which is going to enable us use our Google accounts to send this email. So if I go back to the README file, you will see that I post the link here. For Gmail users, create an app password below. So I will just copy this link and go to my browser, and I'll visit that link in a new page. So once I press enter, I am going to visit this page because I want to create a new app password. So what I need to do first of all is I need to type in the name of the app password which I want to create. So I'm just going to call it, as you can see, I had already created a few app passwords before. I'm just going to call this one tutorial. Now, once I type the name, I'm just going to click create. Now, once you click create, a new app password is going to be generated for you, and you can just copy it. Now, once you copy it, head back to your code, go to your settings.py file, and where you have email host password, just replace what you have here and paste the app password which was generated for you. Now, note that once you copy this and click done, you can never see it again. So make sure you copy it before clicking done. So now that I have copied it, I'm just going to click done, and I can see that the new app password has been created. So you can always delete it anytime you want. So now that we have created an app password and we have set up our email settings in order to send emails using our Gmail accounts, let's head back to the README file. Now the next step is that we need to verify if the email that the user entered is valid. That is, when I enter this email, or when a user enters this email, we need to verify on the back end that a user with that email address actually exists in our database, because we don't want to send a reset password email to a user who does not exist in our database. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using try and except blocks for that. So I am just going to come back to I'll close my settings.py. I'll come back to my views, and then I'm going to write a try and accept block. We are going to try and get a user whose email matches what was entered from the form. So we're just going to write a try and accept block. I'm going to type try, and I'm going to say user, right? So let's just make sure we're following the README file. Okay. We're going to say user is equals to user.object.get. We're going to say email is equals to email. That is, we're trying to look through the database to get a user whose email matches what was entered in the form. So when we get the user, we're just going to make use of the details. But what if no user with this email exists? Then we want to try and get the error that will be generated, because if we try and get a user with this email, if it doesn't exist, Django is going to crash and give an error saying this user does not exist. So we can get that error by using an except block. So we can say except user dot does not exist. That is, if the user that we're trying to get does not exist, what do we want to do? We want to display an error, and we want to redirect to the forgot password page. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to paste what I just copied. So if the user does not exist, then we want to generate a new error saying error, no user with email, and the email that was entered from the front end. No users with that email, no user with that email found. Then we're going to redirect the user back to the reset password page again. So this is basically how we can check if that email is valid. So we're going to try and get the user first of all. And if that user does not exist in the database, it's going to catch the error here, and it's going to generate a new error message saying no user with that email is found. And we're going to redirect the user back to the forgot password page where the message is going to be displayed right here. So what we just need to do right now is we just need to test this to see if it will work. So I'm going to refresh, and I'm going to pass in an email that does not exist. Let me just type in, like, I don't know, an email that does not exist. And once I click reset password, so you can see that it now gives me an error saying no user with this email found. So that means that this user does not exist in our database. So that way we are able to prevent users from just spamming random emails and having the reset email getting sent to those emails. Now, the next step is that we now need to actually send the password reset email if the email is valid. So what that means is that if a user enters a valid email and a user with that email exists, then we need to send a message to that user's email telling them that they can reset their password using the instructions it created. So what we need to do next is that we need to create a new reset ID. So I will just open my models right here. Now, remember that I explained that when a user wants to create a new, when a user wants to reset their password, a new reset ID gets created for them. And then using that reset ID, we can now reset the password for them. So what we're just going to do is we're going to create a new reset ID and in the forgot password page. So you're going to see how this will work. So inside the try and accept block, if we're able to guess the user successfully, then what we want to do is we want to create a new reset password object. We are now going to save it. So we're only passing in user equals user because, again, I said that by default, the reset ID is going to get created because we said default is equals to UUID plus UUID4. So by default, a new ID is going to get generated. And also by default, the date time created when is going to get saved also immediately because we specified auto now add equals true. So what that means is that anytime a new object is created, the current date time of this, or the current date time that the object was created, is going to automatically get set and saved. So that is why the only thing that we need to specify is the user. So in the views, all we're simply going to pass in is password reset and user is equals to the user that we have gotten here. So we're just going to save that new password reset ID. Now, after saving the password reset ID, the next thing that we need to do is we now actually need to get the URL which the user has to visit, or we need to generate the URL which the user has to visit in order to reset their password. Now, we have a view right here called reset password. We haven't written the code yet, but this view is going to help us, or is going to help the user reset the password. So it is in this view that we're actually going to be writing the backend logic to help the user reset the password. Now, what we have to do is we now have to generate that URL so that when the user gets the email, they can click that URL and they'll be brought to this view where they can reset their password. So what we're just simply going to do is I am going to copy this and I'm going to explain what it does. But just follow with me. I will just come back to my views right here and I'm going to paste it. So what we are doing right now is we're trying to generate the password reset URL. So we are just going to make use of the reverse method, which again we had imported at the top right here from Django.urls import reverse. So what we're simply just trying to do is that we are trying to generate the reset password URL. So when you want to make use of the reverse function, what you have to do is first pass in the URL name. So because we're trying to generate the URL for the reset password view, we need the name of that URL, which we called reset password. So we have specified the reset password first. But we need to also note that this URL takes in a parameter of reset underscore ID. So we need to pass that parameter in, and then we're going to say keyword args. We're going to pass it in as a keyword argument, and then we're going to specify that reset underscore ID, which is the parameter that this URL takes in. We're going to specify that reset ID is equals to new password reset dot reset ID. So the reset ID that we're trying to pass in is the reset ID which was generated from here. So we're just going to say new password reset dot reset ID. So it's going to come into this new password reset that we had created, and it is going to get the reset ID which was generated by default. So that is why we are passing in new password ID dot reset ID. So now that we have generated the URL here, we can now properly use that URL in the body of our email. So let's see how we're going to make use of it. So what we now simply need to do is we need to create a new email body. So I will also explain how this works. So just copy it with me and or write it out and paste it. So we're going to say email underscore body is equals to the F keyword because we want to format the string. So it's going to say reset your password using the link below. And we're going to break by 3 lines. And the password and the URL that we're going to pass in is the actual password reset URL. So what the user is going to see is a text saying reset your password using the link below. And 3 lines below this text, we are going to see the reset password. So this way, we are able to generate the password reset URL, which is going to link to this password reset password view. And then we're able to send that URL along with this email body in the email that we are sending to the user whose password they want to reset. Now, the next step that we're going to take is that we just need to copy all of this. We need to create the message. So I will explain what this does. So I will just paste it first of all. Now, after we have generated the URL and we have also specified the email body, what we now need to do is we now actually need to send that email. So we are going to make use of the email message class, which we imported from django.core.mail, because this is inbuilt and it helps us send emails by default. So right now, let's look at the structure of this. So the first thing that we need to specify is the subject of the email if we are going to be making use of the email message class. So the first thing is that we need to specify the subject, and the subject is just going to be reset your password in our case. Now, the next thing that we need to specify is the email body. That is, what do you actually want to send to the recipients? What is the content of the email? Now, the next thing that we need to specify is the user that is sending this email. So we had imported settings earlier at the top when we said from django.conf import settings. So what we can now do is we can say settings.email host user. So when we say that, we are just trying to access, sorry, not that. If I go to my settings.py file, when we say settings.email host user, we are just trying to access email host user, which we had specified in the settings. So we're trying to say that the sender of this email is the email host user, which we had specified in the settings.py file. So right now, after specifying the sender of the email, what we now need to specify is in a list, we need to specify the recipient. So in this list, we can pass in the number of recipients that we want, but we need to pass in the email of whoever is going to receive this email rather. So remember that the user had entered their email, and at this point, we had already done the verification to make sure that the user with that email exists. So we're just going to pass in email, which is what the user entered, as the recipient. So if I enter if for example, I enter email.com or maybe example at gmail.com in this place, this entire email is going to be sent to example at gmail.com because I had passed it into this list. Now, the next step that we need to take is we need to specify email.fail silently equals true and email.send. So I will explain what this means. So let me just paste that right there. So when I paste it, I'm going to explain this now. So when we say email message.fail silently equals true, so what this basically means is that if in the process of trying to send this email, we encounter an error, we are just going to fail silently instead of crashing our entire program. So it's just going to fail silently and continue operating as normal without actually crashing our entire program. So after doing that, we'll just try and send the email by calling email.send. Now, after calling email.send, it's just going to send this email to whichever recipient we specify. So after doing all of that, let's just save the forgot password view changes that we had just made. Now, the next step is that we need to work on the password reset sent view. So what this view is going to do is that it's just going to show the user or tell the user that the email has been sent to their, that the reset password instructions have been sent to their email. And that's why the view is called password reset sent. So before we actually work on it, we just need to make sure that we are redirecting to this view called password reset sent. So I am going to come to my views.py file, and after sending the email, what we just simply want to do is redirect the person to this view, and we see that it takes in a reset ID. So when we say return redirect password reset sent, we are now going to specify the reset ID and say reset underscore ID, and reset underscore ID is going to be equals to new password reset dot reset ID, because we are trying to pass in the reset ID which was just freshly generated from the modules.py file here. So when the user now gets when the email gets sent, we are going to redirect the user to the password reset sent view. Now this view is basically going to take that reset ID, and it's going to check the database to make sure that a password reset object with this ID, which is being passed in, actually exists. So it says get reset ID and make sure that the ID is valid. So I'm just going to copy this right now, and I'm going to come to my password reset sent view, and I am going to paste it. So don't worry, you are going to see how all of this is going to work. But before I proceed, I would just like to show you what the the password reset sent page looks like. So you can see that this is what it should look like. It's just going to say reset sent, and a password link has been sent to your email. Please note that it expires in 10 minutes. So this is basically how the page looks like. So I just wanted to show you guys that. Now the next step is that we need to check if this reset ID, which has been passed into this view, if a reset ID actually exists, if that reset ID actually exists in the database. So we're writing the if, and we're saying if password resets the object.filter, reset ID equals reset ID dot exist. So we're just checking if a password reset object with this reset ID exists in database. So after checking for that, if it exists, we just want to return redirect this HTML view. So we're just going to push this into the if statement. That is, if this reset ID exists, then we want to render out this page to the user, telling them that an email has been sent with instructions of how to reset your password. But if it does not exist, we just want to generate a new error and redirect the person back to the forgot password page. So if, for example, the person tries to access this page with a reset ID that is invalid, then the user is going to get redirected to the forgot password page or the forgot password URL, which is this view. And then the error is going and then an error is going to be displayed that says invalid reset ID. So what we just need to do now is save that and head back to the README file. So that is basically all we're going to do inside the password reset view. We're just going to display that message to the user, telling them that an email has been sent. And we're going to only display it if the reset ID, which is entered, is actually valid and it exists. So else, we're just going to tell the user that the reset ID that you entered is invalid, meaning that it does not exist, and we return them to the forgot password page. Now, the next thing is that we now actually need to work on the password reset view. And this is the final phase of the tutorial. We need to work on a part that actually helps the user to reset the password. So the README file says that we need to head to the reset password.html file and make sure that we add name attribute and CSRF token. So I will just head to my reset password.html file. Now, once I head there, I will come to the form And the first thing I'll do is I'm going to add a CSRF token. So I'll say CSRF underscore token. And then after saying that, I need to give these input fields name attributes. I'm going to give this a name attribute of password, and I'm going to give this one a name attribute of confirm password. Now, once I save that, it means that we can grab the user input using this name attribute. So after doing that, I will just come down here to change this login URL also. So this is going to be URL of login. So after doing that, the next step is that we now need to get the reset ID and make sure that it is valid. So we want to do the exact same thing that we did in the reset password sent view. We first want to check if the reset ID, which has been passed in from the URL, is valid. So before we do anything, first of all, we need to make sure that the reset ID is valid. So we're going to be making use of try and except blocks in this case. So I am just going to copy all of this, and then I will definitely explain all what it does. So just follow with me. I'm going to paste that down here. So we have a try block. Now in this try block, we are trying to get a password reset object that has the reset ID of what has been passed in via the URL. So that is exactly what we did here. So we're just trying to use the get method instead of the filter method. So in this case, if the get method does not find any password reset object with this reset ID, then it's going to give an error saying the password reset object does not exist. So that is where the except block comes into play. So in the except block, we are now going to redirect the person back to the forgot password page. And then we're going to display this error message saying invalid reset ID. So that means that anytime a user hits this view, our Django project or Django or Python is going to check if a password reset object with this reset ID actually exists. So if it doesn't exist, we're going to catch that error in this except block, and we're going to redirect the person back to the forgot password page. So the next step that we now need to take is that we need to get the passwords from form submit. That is, after the user has filled this form and hits the submit button, then we now need to actually get the post request coming in to the view. So inside this try and accept block, I'm going to write an if statement. I'm going to say if request dot method is equals to post. That is, if it is a post request that is coming into this into our view. So what we now need to do is that we now need to actually grab the data that is coming in. So because the user is sending the password and confirm password, we're just going to be getting those values. I'm going to say password is equals to request dot post dot get, and in here I'm going to pass in password, and the next thing is confirm password, and it's going to be equals to request dot post dot get, and in here I'm going to pass in confirm password. So right now what we've been able to do is we've been able to get the password and confirm password which the user has entered from the HTML file. Now the next step is that we need to verify these passwords and reset link. So verify passwords and reset link. So what we want to do is, first of all, we want to create a flag as usual because we need to perform some verification on what the user has entered. I'm going to create this variable and call it passwords have error. So at first, they are set to false because obviously when the post request is coming in at first, no errors have been gotten. So the next thing that we now need to do is we need to perform some verification. So the first thing that we need to check is that we need to make sure that the password and the confirm password fields are equal to each other. So what that means is that if I go to the reset password page right now to show you how it looks like, you'll see that we're just entering the first password and a confirm password. So what we want to do is that we want to make sure that both passwords are equal to each other. So we're going to write an if statement here that checks if both passwords aren't equal to each other. Now, I wanted you to note also that inside this reset password view, it is a reset password.html file that we're using, which we have seen here. So now we're just going to perform this verification, and I will just copy it, and then I will just paste this right here. So I'm just copying and pasting so that I don't have to type all this. Now let's look at what we have here. So we have if password is not equals to confirm password. That is, if the passwords that the user has entered do not match, then we're going to set passwords have error to true, which is the flag, indicating that the passwords that the user has entered has some kind of error. Then we're going to create a new error message saying passwords do not match. Now, after doing that, the next thing that we need to check for is to make sure that the length of the password is greater than 5 characters. Because if you remember, when we were working on the register section, if I scroll up, we had to make sure that the length of the password was greater than 5. If not, we wanted to generate an error telling the user that the password length has to be greater than 5. So we can do just that. So I will just copy this and I will paste it right here. So let me go to the next line and paste it. So what we're just simply saying here is that if the length of the password which has been entered is less than 5 characters, then again, we want to set the flag to true so that we can properly determine if there has been an error or not. Then after that, we now want to create a new error telling the user that password must be at least 5 characters long. So this is how we would do just that in order to determine whether the passwords are the same and if the password is greater than 5 characters or not. So the next thing that we now actually need to check is to make sure that the link has not expired. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that this reset ID has not expired. Now, if I go back to my models.py file, remember that we created a field called created when, and this field basically just helps us store when the password reset object was created. Now remember that I said each reset ID or each password reset object should have a lifespan of 10 minutes. So what we want to do is that before we allow or before we write code to reset the user password, we want to check if the amount of time that we want to check if it has been 10 minutes since the reset ID has been sent. If it has been over 10 minutes since the reset ID has been sent, then we do not want to reset the password using this reset ID because the time has elapsed. So we're going to see how to do that. So I will just copy this and I will come down to paste it. So this is just part of our verification. So there is a variable called expiration time, and it is equals to reset ID dot created when. So reset ID is what we are getting from here because we had gotten the reset ID object using we had gotten the password reset object using the reset ID, which was passed in from the URL. So now we have it here in reset ID. You know what? Let's rename this to password reset ID in order to prevent any clashing between reset ID here and here. So I'm just going to rename this to password reset ID. So now we're going to say password reset ID does created when. So we're trying to get the date time that this password reset was created. So when we get here, we're just adding plus time zone dot time delta equals time zone dot time delta of 10 minutes. So we're getting this time zone from the imports that we made earlier when we said from Django.utils import time zone. So when we scroll down, what we're simply trying to do here is that we're trying to add 10 minutes to the time that the object was created because we want to determine when the object was supposed to expire. So when we say password does reset ID does created when dot plus time zone dot time delta of minutes equals 10, we're just trying to say, okay, get the time that this object was created, then add 10 minutes to it so that we can know exactly when it was supposed to expire or exactly when it was meant to expire. So now that tells us that we can get the expiration time in this variable. So what do we now want to do next since we have gotten the expiration time? What we want to check is that if the current time is greater than the expiration time, so obviously it means that the code has expired, because if the current time is greater than the time that the code has expired at, it means that we can no longer use the code and the code has expired. So I'm just going to copy this code and explain how it works. I'm going to come down and paste this if statement right here. And then we are saying if time zone dot now, that is if the current time is greater than expiration time. So obviously that means that if the time has elapsed, if this code has expired, then we just want to set this flag also to true. So password have error is equals to true, and the error is reset link has expired. So we're just trying to tell the user that this reset ID or the reset link has expired because the 10 minutes period has elapsed. So I will just scroll down. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to check if there are no errors. So if there are no errors, it basically means that we can now reset the user password. So it means that the passwords match each other, the password length is greater than 5 characters, and then the duration for the reset ID hasn't been elapsed and it hasn't passed yet. So the ID is still valid. So what we're just going to do is we're going to write an if statement, which is going to check if we don't have any errors. So I'm going to come down, and after all this verification has been done, I'm just going to write if not passwords have sorry, not that, if not passwords have error. That is, if the value is not true, that is, if passwords have error is not true, it means that obviously we don't have any errors, and the errors weren't set from here, so it would be false. So that means that if we don't have any errors, what we just want to do is we want to reset the passwords. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the user who owns this reset ID. So I'm going to say user is equals to reset ID dot user. But instead of saying reset ID, I'm going to rename this to password underscore reset ID. So what I'm just saying is the password reset ID dot user. So Django is going to go into this module and grab the user that is associated with this reset ID, because that is the user whose password we would like to reset. Now, after getting the user here, the next step is that we just want to set the new password of the user. And we can make use of the set password inbuilt method of the class. So what we'll just say is, I'm just going to paste that. We'll just say user.set password of the new password, which was entered here. We're just trying to tell Django to set the new password of this user to whatever password has been entered. And then we just want to save the new user credentials. Then the next step is that we need to delete the reset ID, because what that means is that if the user has now successfully reset their password using this reset ID, then what we need to do is we need to obviously delete it, because we don't want a case where a user has reset their password using a reset ID, and then they can now go back and reset their password using the same reset ID. So that would be dangerous, and we don't want a case like that. So what I'll just do is I'll just copy this and I'll paste it. So after updating the new password, I'm just going to delete the reset ID. So after deleting the reset ID, the next thing that we're just simply going to do is that we're going to redirect the user back to the login page. So after the user has reset their password, we're now going to take the user to the login page and tell them, okay, you have reset your password. Now what you can do is you can just log in. So I will come here and paste this. I'm going to create a new message saying password reset, proceed to login. So when they get redirected to the login page, they are going to see this success message getting displayed right back at them. But before we proceed, there's something else that we need to do. Now, in the case where the code or the reset ID has expired, What we need to do is we need to delete that ID. So I'm just going to go to my views and scroll to the top here. So if the time zone dot now is greater than the expiration time, we want to set passwords have error equals true and create a new message. And after creating this message, we just want to delete that reset ID. Now we are deleting it because it has already expired and there's no point keeping it in database because again, it has expired. It is of no use no more. So that is why we are going to delete it if it has expired. Now, after doing all of this, the next step that we need to take is that we just need to write an else block. So in the else block, it just simply means that, okay, if passwords indeed have an error, that is, if passwords have error, in the else block, we just want to redirect the user back to the reset password page so that the errors can be displayed. So I'm just going to paste that else block right here. So by saying else, it simply means that, okay, if the passwords have error is true, it means that there's obviously an error. So we would like to redirect the user back to the same page, which is the reset password. And we need to pass in the reset ID because again, the URL takes in a parameter of reset ID. And then that ID gets passed to the reset password view, which is what we are getting from here. So at this point, the messages had already been created in the as errors. So when they are getting redirected back to this view, they are going to be seeing the error messages which we had created earlier. So the next step after that is just testing the code. And so before testing the code, there is one last thing we need to actually do. We need to make a few changes. Now here where we have password reset URL, we are just going to create a new variable and we're going to call it full password reset URL. And I'm going to explain why we are doing this. So the reason why we are creating a new full password reset URL is because this line that we have given here will not totally give us the complete URL of this reset password view. So we are going to see exactly what we are going to do. So when we run this reverse, or when Python runs or Django runs this reverse line right here, what it is going to do is it will just go to the URLs and just generate for us only this URL. So it's going to be reset password forward slash whatever ID it is. So it is not going to give us the complete URL like the domain, which is localhost colon 8 localhost colon 8000 forward slash reset password forward slash the reset ID. So it won't actually do that for us. The only thing that it is going to return is reset password forward slash whatever ID that we pass in. So in order to generate the full ID, the full reset URL, that is why we need to do this. So first of all, we are going to use the F string so that we can generate the full URL. So what I'm just going to do is I'm first going to pass in request.get underscore scheme. So what this is going to do basically is it's going to return to us what protocol we are using, whether it is HTTP or HTTPS. So it's just going to give us the current scheme, either HTTP or HTTPS. Now we need to do HTTP or HTTPS colon forward slash. And what we need to do next is we need to get the domain. So I'm going to say request.get underscore host. So what request does guest host does is that it will just go to the URL and it is going to get whatever domain is currently serving our Django project. So in this case, it is localhost, which is running on port 8000. So that is what is going to get returned back to us. Now, the next thing that we just need to pass in is the password reset URL. So this is how we are going to get the full reset URL. It's going to be request.get scheme, which is going to be HTTP or HTTPS, then to be colon forward slash, then it's going to be the local host or the local host or domain name. And it's going to be the domain name which is serving our Django project. And in this case, it is going to be localhost. then it's now going to be forward slash the reset URL, which is going to be generated from this reverse call here. Then all I'm just going to do is in the body, instead of passing in password reset URL, I'm going to pass in full password reset URL. And after doing that, that is basically all we need to do in order to test this code. So if I go to my admin dashboard, there is something I did earlier. Now remember that I created a user called Jane123. So I went into the email address and actually put in an email of mine that actually exists, because we are going to try and reset the password of Jane123, and we need a valid email address for that to work. And I had already logged into that email address from my browser. So now we are going to try and reset the password of Jane123. So I will go back to my browser, or where I have where I signed up as Jane, and I'll hit the reset password. Now please note that for the reset password link, I want you to go back to your login page, and where we have this forgot your password, I changed the URL from what it was before, which was this hash, and I changed it to the correct URL, which was just forgot password. I'm going to pass in URL and say forgot dash password. So when you do this, when you do that, it's going to properly link to the reset password page. So I'm going to click that. Now the next thing is that we need to pass in the email of the user whose account we want to reset. But let's say I pass in a wrong email. Once I hit reset password, you can see that we get an error saying no user with this email that was entered can be found. So right now, let's just enter the correct email. Now, once I hit reset password, you see that we are getting an error saying object has no attribute get scheme. Now we are getting this error because it says str object is not callable. So what we're just simply going to do is remove this parenthesis here, because it is not callable, and request.scheme returns to us the string, returns to us a string, which is either HTTP or HTTPS. So now I will just go back and refresh the page. And after refreshing the page, I'm going to pass in the email again. And once I hit reset password, we should get sent to the reset password has been sent page. So once we hit reset password, we just have to wait and see if the email gets sent, hopefully. So now we can see that we are being taken to the reset sent page, and it says a password reset link has been sent to your email. Please note that it expires in 10 minutes. Now, if you look at the URL, you can see that it is reset sent forward slash the reset ID. Now, the reset ID was dynamically passed in from the URL into the method. So that is why we are able to see this page. So what we can now do is that we can check the email to see if we actually received it. So when I go back to my email, what I will do is refresh. Now once I refresh, I can see that the email has already come in. So once I check this email right now, I can see that I have this link being returned to us, and it says reset your password using the link below. So we successfully were able to send the email to the recipient using this email address, which we specified in our settings.py file. And then we were able to successfully define what message it is. So if I scroll to the point where we defined it, this was the message: reset your password using the link below. And then we were able to generate the full link, which is what we can see here. So I will just copy this link to test to see if it actually works. And after copying that link, I'll head back to my other browser, and I'm going to paste that link into the browser. So now we are being returned back to this page called the reset password page. It is now actually on this page that we can reset the password. So let's say I enter two passwords that do not match each other. I'll just press enter. And once I press enter, it says passwords do not match. So basically that helps us check if the passwords match or not. But let me now enter two passwords that match. So I'll enter the first password and then the confirm password. So once I hit reset password, hopefully that should reset the password for us. And the password has been reset, and you can see that we are being redirected to the password reset. We are being redirected to the login page, and a message of password reset, proceed to login, has been given back to us. And that is coming from this section right here, where we said, okay, after resetting the password, and deleting the reset ID, I want you to just create a new message and redirect the person back to the login page. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to try and log in with the credentials. So I believe the account is called Jane123, and I'm going to log in with the new credentials or with the new password. So once I hit login, hopefully that should work, and you can see that we are being redirected back to, or we're being redirected to the login page because the credentials were successfully because the credentials were successfully set. Now, if I tried resetting my password again with that link, you can see that we were immediately redirected back to the reset password page because it said invalid reset ID. So the moment I even pasted that link, what it did was it's it came here to check if that ID actually existed. But because we had already deleted the ID at this point, it caused us to move to the accept block because it said the password reset objects does not exist. So then a message of invalid reset ID was generated, and we were redirected to the forgot password page. So that is why that does not work. So that is all we're going to talk about today, guys. And remember that if you want to get all the code, there is going to be a link in the description which will take you to the GitHub repository where I have uploaded all the code. So if you have any question, please don't hesitate to leave it in the comment section and I will reply you.